So, Ryan, let's begin with the keys to victory for the Notre Dame offense. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to try to give you a little bit more detail than just simply don't turn the ball over, the simple things, right?
Like coaching cliches. Let's call them
run,
coaching
block,
cliches.
and catch. Okay,
Yes.
great. That's wonderful. But some of the stuff is going to be sort of obvious, and we're going to explain why they're important. So we're going to take 4 keys on each side of the ball, and they kind of build on each other. They're not necessarily most important to least important or least important building to the most important. They all kind of build on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the offense, I think the first one is a big picture thing, Ryan. It is imperative. And I asked Coach Freeman about this today's press conference. They have to start fast. Yep. The one thing you simply cannot do on top of it, don't turn the ball over, stuff like that. The one thing you cannot do against this Ohio State team is fall behind big early.
Yes.
That's why they get the 66-17s and the 56-7s, because they just jump all over a team. Then you get in this mode where you're now out of your game. You've got to now throw. They can pin the ears back, come after you, force turnovers. The next thing you know, it's 35-7 at halftime.
Yep.
Where like that's what this team can do to you if you're not able to kind of come out and set your agenda immediately. So the first thing this Notre Dame offense has to do is start fast. And we'll get into all of the things of what that looks like, Ryan. But if the defense is starting off well, then you've got to get some separation early and make Ohio State play catch up. If the defense maybe needs 2 to 3 series to kind of get caught up to what Ohio State's doing and Ohio State's putting points on the board, you got to match and keep the defense in the game and long enough for them to make the necessary changes. It's either one of those things require that the Notre Dame offense come out early and be effective in moving the ball and getting points early. That's sort of the big picture key to this game, because if you don't do that, this game could be over by halftime, and that's true for anybody Ohio State plays. That was true for Clemson in the 2020 playoff game. They couldn't keep up early, and Ohio State just overwhelmed them, and then they had no chance. You have to be able to come out early and start fast.
I think there's 2 keys from that sense, Brian, for me. One is the natural Ohio State, and this is most offenses, so this isn't something that is just relative to Ohio State, but offenses for most part, they feed off of staying in rhythm, right? Building on a building, gaining momentum. Ohio State's the same way, man. Like there's going to be moments where Ohio State, the offense is going to be methodical, right? Like it's just going to move at a very good pace, and you're going to have to kind of counteract that momentum. And if they get up on you, I mean, that means that their offense is probably humming, and then you have to come from behind. And then at that point, you're saying, even if you can mount a comeback, you have to get into a shootout with them. And that's not an advantageous way to beat Ohio State. It's not. Like we talked about that yesterday a little bit. You don't want to get into a game where, although I have the utmost confidence in Tyler Buchner, I don't want him to get into a shootout with CJ Stroud, right? Like I don't want that to happen.
CJ throw for throw. You
don't want that to happen, right? Like you want to alternate punches, but you do not want to get a situation where you have to now be perfect, and your margin for error now reduces to that smallest amount. And the other thing for me, Brian, I don't know if you agree with this, but Notre Dame is also a young football team in a lot of spots, right? Like we've talked endlessly this offseason about the sophomore class and why it gives us so much hope, right? Getting off to a good start builds confidence very quickly if you're a younger team, right? But adversely, and I'm not saying this isn't relative to Notre Dame. This is relative to all young players for the most part. If they hit adversity early, sometimes it shrinks you a little bit, especially if it's your first career start in the horseshoe, right? Like those things can be detrimental to playing your best possible football game. So getting off to a fast start, I think also building confidence for a younger football team in a lot of spots. I think that is it's my biggest takeaway, if we're being completely honest, is I need the sophomores, the younger players, the guys that might be starting their first game at Notre Dame, they need to build confidence early. And it would be the worst possible outcome if Ohio State jumps on them, because I just don't know how that's going to affect some of their psyche, if we're being honest.
Well, on top of that too, Ryan, you have to look at it from the standpoint of the faster that they start off, the louder the crowd noise gets, the more raucous the environment gets, and that's a part of it. I mean, I think sometimes home field advantage can be overplayed a little bit. Like you're not a 20-point better team than someone, but because you're on the road, you're a 10-point worse team than them. But a game that could be a 4-point game in either direction, could be the difference between that home environment. That's something that hurt Notre Dame in 2019 against Georgia. You lost by 6, a big part of the game. And how many false start penalties because you weren't prepared for the crowd noise? Like, that's the most asinine thing I've ever heard Brian Kelly say, and that's a guy that said a lot of asinine things. How are you not prepared for it was going to be loud at Georgia? I don't think Marcus Freeman's going to make that same mistake, but the point is the louder the crowd gets, the worse it gets. And then you flip to Michigan State. And anyone that's been at Spartan Stadium knows the Spartan Stadium can get a little bit loud. And you think of the 2018 game or 2017 game at Notre Dame. I mean, they got on them quick. They went right down the field on their first drive. Bam, bam, bam. Deep ball to St. Brown. Brandon scores on a quarterback draw, 7-0. Brian Lewerke takes Michigan State to get around near midfield. Julie Love pick 6, and you could hear a pin drop in that stadium. 14-0, just like that. Mm-hmm. By halftime, they knew the game was over. And, so now you're on the road, and it's now a pro Notre Dame environment, because it's your crowd making noise, not theirs. But when the opposite is true, which is what happened later that year in Miami, is Notre Dame allowed Miami to get off to a good start, and that place went nuts. And that is one of the most front-running crowds ever. Well, Ohio State fans are not front-runners. They're going to be loud until they no longer have a reason to be loud. And that's going to be the key is they're going to have to but that factors into your youth thing, Ryan. Mm-hmm. Some of the veterans are used to that. They've been in those environments before, right? But the younger guys, this may be the first time they've been in that environment. And that's why it's important to kind of come out quickly and just try to keep that crowd a little bit out of this contest.
I mean, and to your point too, Brian, you're 7:30 in the Horseshoe, right? Like, it's going to be loud there naturally. So you're going to be fighting against the crowd a little bit, right? And that only gets worse if you're also getting off to a slow start and you're letting them build momentum. The more momentum they grab, the louder that crowd is going to get. And that is also can be debilitating a little bit to a younger team in some spots, right? Like, how are sophomores, freshmen, whatever it is, how are they going to react to that type of environment? That's what is going to be interesting. I mean, it's going to be loud regardless, but especially if Ohio State's able to gain some momentum early, it might be a tough thing to overcome.
So let's go to point number 2, Ryan. And point number 2 is an obvious one, but it's an important one, and it's a little bit of an all-encompassing one, and that is they have to control the line of scrimmage. There are so many aspects to this, right? It's not just run the football, right? Establish the run. That's true, and that's going to be point number 3. And so we're going to kind of do these two together a little bit because they do kind of go together, but it's not as simple as just establishing a line of scrimmage to run the ball. There's a lot more to it than that. And the first thing for me, when I think of establishing the line of scrimmage, Ryan, is you're setting a tone. Because what does establishing control the line of scrimmage means? It means you're coming off your physical, you're getting movement, your assignment correct, you're gashing Ohio State. And gashing doesn't mean you're ripping off 40-yard run after 40-yard run. It means you're going 5, 6, 7, 9, 15, 5, 6, 8. You're just gashing them. You're just moving the chains with ease, just nonstop because you're controlling the line of scrimmage with the run game. Your backers are not able to get over. You're easily getting off at a second level, things along those lines. Those are all things that you where you want to be as an offense is just setting that tone, that physical, like, hey, y'all, we're here for a battle. We're here to fight. I mean, you better make sure that you're ready to bring it. That's part number 1 to it. Part 2 is control line of scrimmage is protecting the quarterback. I mean, that's another big part of it is, Ohio State's, defensive linemen are talented, but they were really young last year and they're going to be way better. Well, that's also true of Notre Dame's offensive tackles. Blake Fisher and Joe Alt, they're really talented and really young. So who wins that battle? Well, I got a better we have a new defensive coordinator now. He's going to make them better. Oh, okay. Notre Dame hired Harry Heastan, right? Like, we could do this game all day. End of the day, they got to play well. They've got to control the line of scrimmage. They can't let those young players who are very talented. JT is talented. Talik Williams is very talented, right? I know you're very high on his film. He didn't play a ton last year, which adds, like 180 some snaps is all he played. Guy had like 7 tackles for loss and 5 sacks on those 180 some plays. Highly productive player. Jack Sawyer's a talented kid. They're playing in a defense that's a little bit more sound than it was last year, if I'm being kind, but also one that's aggressive. You've got to be able to stone them. Hey, if they bring 5 or 6, you step up, you plant them on the ground, you chop that linebacker that blitzes, and you give your quarterback time to throw the football. that's just another way that you start fast and establish line of scrimmage. And then, of course, the final piece is kind of point number 3, Ryan, and that's what we'll put them together is controlling line of scrimmage then leads to the ability to run the football.
Yep.
And if Notre Dame can run the football effectively early, that is how it accomplishes a lot of the things that we talked about. It keeps them in good down and distances, right? What's a key to starting early? Keep yourself ahead of the chains all game long. If you're running the ball early, that means your quick game is more effective because you're avoiding 2nd and 9s and 2nd and 12s and 3rd and 8s, where you're in a 3rd and 3, and it's like, hey, guys, we have our whole offensive package here on 3rd down. That makes it harder to defend. It forces them to get more into the box, which then opens up your perimeter pass game. Marcus Freeman has talked a lot about, Ryan, the players have mentioned it a lot, got to defend 53 1/3. Well, that's fine, but the best way to attack 53 1/3 is to condense the defense. The way that you condense the defense is by running the football effectively, between the tackles. And there's some things you can do on the perimeter, but if you're gashing them with inside zone and duo and counters and power, quarterback power read and things like that, then all of a sudden, boy, they're in a bind. And then all of a sudden you start getting the read zone stuff with Tyler Buchner. And then that overhang has to be thinking like, okay, I can't defend the bubble because I got to worry about Tyler Buchner pulling this thing. Next thing you know, you're doing that read zone. That guy squeezes in, you pull it and you throw it out on the bubble screen. That's how that to me is, I'm a believer of working inside out. Just that's my philosophy. I think Tommy Rees is similar. If you work inside out, you're going to be effective. What killed Notre Dame last year in the bowl game is Notre Dame kind of worked outside in because they couldn't run the ball. Well, after the first couple quarters, after just shredding Oklahoma State for 30 minutes, they were able to say, okay, look, we're gonna take away their quick stuff on the outside, and we're gonna put more resources to, defending that box. And because Notre Dame couldn't defend that, they were able to then drop guys underneath some of the quick game, take the quick game away with the press. And because Notre Dame couldn't run the football, all that perimeter stuff was gone.
Yeah.
And, that's the thing is if they would have been able to come out in the third quarter and run the football, Oklahoma State's counter to the perimeter pass game stuff would have resulted in just getting gashed, right? Just ramming them up the middle. And so that's the thing is if you can establish the running game, it opens up so many other things. It's harder to defend 53 1/3 when you've got to worry about what's going on in the box. And so controlling the line of scrimmage leads to all those things. And the end result at the end of the day is you're running the football, and that's going to be a big, big key for Notre Dame against Ohio State.
And everything is built off of the run in this offense, in my opinion, right? Like some offenses are built for the pass to set up the run. Some are built up for the run to set up the pass. But Notre Dame's offense specifically is one where it's a sequence of things, right? It goes from ability to run the ball, establishes the read game, the ability to pull and work the RPO game, the ability to work and do the play action game. All of those things are so intertwined in this offense. And honestly, the biggest key for me is that in this segment is you want to get Tyler Buchner comfortable, right? And how to get him comfortable is to get a run game going, man, because all his skill set works so well off the fact of if you were able to just, you mentioned, running some, counters and doing everything. But I mean, as simple as if you can just get a solid push and you're able to establish just inside zone early, like just as simple as possible and get that read game go and get the RPO game, you're going to get him some easy completions on quick game. You're going to have some easy completions that are going to turn into bigger plays working in the RPO game. And then you're going to give him some opportunities to take shots down the field. All those things spurn off of the one simple fact that Notre Dame has to be able to run the football. If they can, then I don't think there's any limits, any cap on how good this offense can be. Not only just against Ohio State, but just in general. Like it all feeds off of one another. Notre Dame averaged 4.1 yards a carry last year. It's not good enough. It's not.
Not even close.
Not even close.
Not even in the universe. No. The same galaxy is good. Right.
No, it's not. Because, I mean, even we've talked about Ohio State not having the emphasis on the run game enough last year. They averaged 5.5 yards a carry. Right? Like, exactly. It's just crazy. So, for Notre Dame to be as successful as possible, you have to establish the run because also, Brian, the weakest, well, I don't want to say the weakest. The area of concern that I have most for Ohio State's defense is the linebackers, right? The linebackers, second-level defenders. I want to force them into making some mistakes, right? Like, I want them to feel very unsettled and uncomfortable on the second level because, I mean, RPO can mess with a lot of different players, structurally, third level, second level. But the one that you think of most is that overhang and that weak side linebacker, right? Like those are the positions where you're like, RPO game is going to mess with those dudes all day, every day. Establish a run game is going to give you those options. And you want options in this game if you're going to be successful offensively.
Well, even if you look at Notre Dame, the last couple of years, they had a 1,000-yard running back. Kyron Williams was a 1,000-yard rusher. Right, the Notre Dame offensive line was a Joe Moore Award finalist in 2020. They still weren't a great rushing team in 2020. They may have had a talented offensive line. They played some bad teams. They benefited from having Harry and Chris Watt involved in that. And if you don't believe me, I don't care. I know it's true. Right, and that was the anomaly. But if you look at the last 4 years, Notre Dame averaged 4.1 yards per carry, 5.02 in 2020, 4.92, and 4.43. Since Harry left. The last year of Harry Hiestand being here, it was 6.25. That's a pretty big jump. And then, like 2015 was the other year they were a great rushing team. They were 5.6. But that 5.6 came, they gave up some sacks. Deshaun Kaiser averaged 3.9 as a rusher. But they had, some minus yards on team. But their leading rusher that year, CJ Prosise, averaged 6.55 yards per carry, and Josh Adams averaged 7.2 yards per carry. You look at 2017, Josh Adams was a 6.9 yards per carry. Brandon Wimbush was a 5.7. Deion McIntosh was a 5.7. Dexter Williams was a 9.2. And Notre Dame's, kind of trying to think the least explosive guy on their roster that year, a running back, was Tony Jones, who was their ball control back. He averaged 5.3 yards per carry. So it was just one of those things where that's the range that Notre Dame has to be in. Whereas you look at Kyron Williams the last 2 years, and this isn't a knock on Kyron Williams, he averaged only 5.3 yards per carry in 2020, the year that he was 1,000-yard back, second-team All-American. On the 2017 offense, he was barely ahead of Tony Jones. He would have been the fourth highest back in yards per carry on that team. Tony Jones is a 5.27. He was last. Deion McIntosh averaged 5.7 yards per carry. And then Josh Adams was 6.9 and Brandon Wimbush was 5.7. Right?
I can't believe that Deion McIntosh averaged 5.7 yards a carry. Yeah. That's bizarre, man. That's crazy.
I mean, they racked up 180 yards on Michigan State that year in a game in which Michigan State, if you remember, Ryan, had the number 2 rush defense in the country that year.
That was like Joe Bacci and all that crew, right?
Yes, yeah. And Kenny
Willikis.
Yes, he was another guy on that group. But that team, Ryan, if you remember, Josh Adams got hurt in the first half. Then Dexter had a few carries, caught a touchdown pass. He got hurt. Tony Jones was already out because he got hurt against BC the week before. Second half, they go for $180 on Michigan State's second-ranked rush defense. They played almost the whole second half with Deion McIntosh as their running back.
He ran hard, man. So, I'll give him credit. Yeah, he ran hard in that game.
He did. But that was the point, is like it didn't matter who was at running back. It was because it was about the line. And that's going to be the key here, is that they've got to be able to have that kind of team, not just as a whole, as a season, but in this game. They've got Chris Tyree's got a gash. Audrick's got a gash. Logan's got a gash. And then, of course, Tyler Buckner's got to do what he's got to do. And I'm not even talking about scrambles. I don't want to see Tyler Buckner with like 75 yards of scrambles. And you're like, hey, we ran for 190 yards against Ohio State. I'm like, yeah, but like Tyler Buckner had a 50-yard gain on a scramble and a pass play. You didn't run the ball. It's not about rushing yards. It's about effectively running the football on running downs. That's the key. You've got to do that. And then the fourth piece, Ryan, for this one to me is Tommy Rees has to find ways to scheme up opportunities for big plays. And when those opportunities come, they've got to make them. In games like this, with Notre Dame's offense against Ohio State's defense, to me, and it's the same way on the other side of the ball, you're going to have somewhere between 5 to 7 opportunities. If the other team plays well and you play well, you're going to have at the most 5 to 7 opportunities to rip off a big play. Mm-hmm. And you've got to take advantage on the majority of those plays. And you've got to create those opportunities. We've talked about this week, Ryan. You go back and watch the Clemson game in 2018. They harassed Trevor Lawrence the whole game. He only had 5 or 6 clean pockets the whole game. But you know what he did on those 5 or 6 clean pockets? He ripped Notre Dame. I mean, just ripped them. That you have to take advantage of those things. Notre Dame hasn't been able to do that on offense in past years. We've seen last year, Ryan, in September, watching all 22 for you. I was at most, those road games, and and you're watching Braden Lindsey just smoke a guy on a post route and the ball never comes because the quarterback's getting sacked.
Yep.
You know, there's opportunities where the quarterback doesn't get to that second read, which was, guy coming open on a wheel route. Those are missed opportunities Notre Dame cannot afford. It's up to Tommy Rees to game plan and call those things, which is going to involve a lot of things. It's what I asked Coach Freeman about, and using motions and shifts. And he explained why those are dangerous for a defense. It causes a lot of communication. You find yourself, maybe you communicate incorrectly, or if you just line up and play, then the defense can make their calls and everybody knows what to do. And that was some of the things I used to complain about, like 14, 15, and 16, is they would just kind of come out in 11 personnel and run, flex, or they'd just run like doubles, and just, the motion would be like, the back would go from right to left. You know what I mean? Like that would be it. That's not even a motion. That's just okay, we've checked the call and we're going to run inside zone this way. And it was pretty easy to kind of tell what Notre Dame was going to do, and they still would score on people.
Yep.
If you can do things where you're motioning, like where you shift across, then motion, and do all those type of things, you're going to be able to, and then doing things to isolate, even something as simple last year against Stanford, where you motion Braden Lindsey down to get him off the press and then bang a quick post route, and it sets up for a touchdown because you're able to play action, ISO that flat defender, he's going to be inside the safety, and then bam, you nail it. Doing different things like that, where you're able to generate a leverage advantage, an angle advantage, a numbers advantage, getting a matchup that you like. Hey, we really like Lorenzo Styles against that guy in coverage. We really want to try to find ways to isolate Chris Tyree against this matchup in coverage. We think we can do this with Michael Mayer to get him in a good matchup. Or we think when we move Michael Mayer here, they're going to so overreact to that we can then get something going back here with this matchup. All that is part of the chess match that is what I love about football. It's the relationships with players, and that are the only two things I miss about coaching. It's that mental chess match that is a Saturday, where I'm running this because I know I'm going to get you to sucker down, and as soon as I get you to sucker down, I'm running double post over your head. You know what I mean? Like all part of that stuff is Tommy Rees has got to be on top of his game.
Yep.
And then if those calls are made, it's got to be executed. If Braden Lindsey beats a guy on a post route, the line's got to protect. If the line protects, Tyler Buckner's got to make the throw. If Tyler Buckner makes a throw, you got to haul it in. You can't miss those opportunities because you won't get a bunch of them against Ohio State. And when those opportunities come, especially in the pass game, they got to take advantage. So creating big plays is a big key, because I just don't think – I know ball control and all this, but I just don't think for 60 minutes Notre Dame's going to be able to just go on a bunch of 10 to 12 play drives, eat up the clock, each team gets 6 possessions, and like all of a sudden it's like playing the triple option. That's not going to happen. If you want to win this game, yes, you need to control the ball, but you got to generate some big plays. And to me, big plays are just as discouraging to a defense as just getting the ball ran down your throat for 15 straight plays. I think they both can be detrimental to your psyche as a defensive player, Ryan. And if you can do both, then I think it's almost like, well, what are we going to do? What can we do now? So I do think there need to be some big plays, because we talked about what the run game can do for the pass game. If the run game is successful and that opens up some pass game opportunities, Ohio State has zero chance to slow Notre Dame down. Zero. Because if you have to put resources to stop the run game, and we're winning one-on-ones, looking at it from a coaching standpoint, and we're winning one-on-ones on the outside, I've got everything that I can run at you.
Yeah.
And if it's executed, then it's going to be successful. And we talked a lot about that being a danger in defending Ohio State. I think this year it's going to be a problem for teams defending Notre Dame. Now they got to go out and prove us to be correct on that, because I think you and I both believe there's some athletes on this Notre Dame offense that can be game changers. Tom Rees has got to design up those opportunities. Line's got to block. Buckner's got to get the ball out, and they've got to make those plays. I think that, to me, is the final key for this offense to be able to win this game.
And I'm pretty confident in the structure that it's going to happen, right? Because I know we've talked a lot about this. There's talent, obviously. Tommy Rees, I think, is a very bright guy, and he understands how to scheme things open. I believe in that. The biggest thing that we've talked about all offseason is you got Chancey Stuckey to come in here, and you got Harry Heastand back, because you haven't been able to take advantage of those things because not everything is working in a complete manner, right? Like last year, like you said, there were some guys open, but protection might break down. Might be a guy that can't get off a press, and it disrupts the timing of a pass play, right? Like there was those inconsistencies last year from just a general understanding of how to play football, if we're being completely honest, right? And how to play the position, should say, the nuance of playing wide receiver, playing offensive line. I have a feeling that those things will be better. And I have a feeling that Tommy Rees will be able to scheme some stuff open. At that point, it's about your guys making plays, man. And if they're prepared, I think they have an opportunity to create big plays. Because the biggest thing for me, Brian, is, and we talked about this, I think Jim Knowles is going to look at this offense and Harry Heastand coming back and the running back stable they have and Tyler Buckner as a running quarterback. And they're going to look at them and say, you're going to try to run the football on us, and we're not going to let you do that. Point blank, right?
And Notre Dame hasn't hidden that fact throughout the entire fall camp.
They haven't. Every time you hear Marcus Freeman, he's talking about establishing the run and getting that pace going. And yeah, 100%. And Jim Knowles knows it, I think. Right. I don't think it's chicken. Like, I think that Marcus Freeman truly believes that's what we're going to do, right? And in that simple fact, Jim Knowles is going to allocate resources so that doesn't happen. So what does that give you? That means there's less allocated resources to play, it may be a robber coverage to one side or double, bracket a wide receiver, or, to have two guys that kind of eyes on Michael Mayer all the time, right? Like, there's going to be less allocated opportunities in the passing game. So that means one-on-one opportunity somewhere. It's going to be a one-on-one opportunity at some point. Well, not at some point, a lot in this football game early on, in my opinion. I think there's going to be a lot. And the only reason that they have to change their philosophy in that regard, right, Brian, is if you make a couple plays, right? Like, he's not going to change unless you make him change.
Right.
You hit a couple big plays, then there's less players in the box. And that's where you start chipping away at that defense. And I mean, if you can run the ball even with players in the box, you sure as anything can run the ball with less players in the box, right? So it comes off of the simple fact of you have to be able to run the football, but when they allocate the resources to stopping the run, you have to win one-on-one matchups. You have to. You have a quarterback that is a dynamic type of athlete. You have multiple wide receivers that are 4.4s and better athletes. You have a running back that is a 4.3 athlete. You have athletes if you're Notre Dame. But in order for them to really respect the ability to work on the perimeter, work vertically, work space, they have to make plays, and they're going to get those one-on-one matchups, and you have to capitalize. There's no doubt.
A game that this reminds me a lot of is the 2017 USC game. Now, this Ohio State team is better than that USC team in 2017. Like, that was an 11-3 USC team, but that wasn't a great team. It was a really good team with a lot of weapons. So this isn't a complete apples to apples comparison, but the point that I'm going to make is the same. USC was not a 49-14 worse team than Notre Dame. Why was Notre Dame able to have success that day? Because USC came into that game and said, you are not going to beat us running the football. Kind of Notre Dame, I think, went out three and out on that first drive. They came out that next drive, and they just started hitting USC with stuff down the field. I mean, early in the game, they ran I think it might have been on the second series. They just got Kevin Stepherson back. And so what do? They come out and they run a reverse with him. I'm actually going to look that play-by-play up because I believe I'm correct on that. Yeah. They came out that next series after the first 3 and out. Brandon Wimbush goes for 12 yards on a quarterback run. They run a reverse to Kevin Stepherson that goes for 13 yards. And then Brandon Wimbush bangs a post route over the top for a touchdown to Equanimeous St. Brown. Just like that, it's 7-0. Right. And then they get the ball back, and the defense, and Notre Dame, the next series goes down. 7 yard, goes 7 points. And how do they score? Brandon Wimbush throws a downfield back shoulder to Kevin Stepherson for a touchdown. Notre Dame was running the ball okay in that game, some 10-yard runs, 13 runs. They also had another 11-yard run for Kevin Stepherson on that series as well. So they were kind of getting USC guessing. The ability to throw the ball down the field and bang them with some of those reverses, all of a sudden, USC's like, okay, how the heck do we defend this team now? Like, what are we supposed to do now? And so then that kind of leads to all of a sudden Notre Dame just starts wearing them down and just gashing them, because now you've got to worry about the reverses that are hurting you. You've got to worry about the post routes over top that are hurting you. Now all of a sudden USC has no answers. They're 3rd and 10. They're dropping back. Brandon Wimbush takes off running and converts the 3rd down. Like, when you can get a team like that into that scenario, all of a sudden a game where Notre Dame was probably a 7 to 10 point better team than USC, Ohio State that year beat USC 24-17. right? I mean, they were a good team that year, but why was Notre Dame able to absolutely destroy them? Because USC's defense, that's what we call defending the whole width and length of the field, Ryan, is that right there. When you're hitting them with that stuff and those big plays and throwing the ball down the field, how do you defend the run then? Because USC's had a very similar philosophy that everybody else is going to play this team is going to have. And this team, I think, has more weapons in the pass game than I think that 2017 team did. With Cameron Smith, I mean, that was the first game back for Stepherson, or second game back. He played sparingly against North Carolina the week before. But if you can create those big plays in the pass game, it almost makes it impossible to stop that offense. And again, we've said that about Ohio State. If they can run the football, it makes it really hard to stop their pass game, and vice versa, because they both make each other better. So those big play opportunities, because just completing a 15-yard gain, the occasional 20-yard gain, is not going to force Jim Knowles to come out of his game plan. It's got to be that, oh, snap, we went cover one. Braden Lindsey just smoked my guy on the outside for a 50-yard touchdown. Or, I thought I could put Tommy Eichenberg in coverage against Chris Tyree, and they just scored a 50-yard touchdown on a narrow route where he just outran the guy, or on a wheel route or something like that. Or, those are the kind of things that are going to make you say, you know what, like they're burning us. And not blown coverages either. It's like just you scheme yourself into those big opportunities, and it's going to force Ohio State to think twice. And that's the way to do it. I mean, that's the only way that they're going to be able to have a chance in this game to score enough to win this game. Because again, this is not. I'll be shocked if this is a 20-17 game. Shocked. I don't think you beat them with 20 points or 23 points or even 27 points per se. You're going to have to get to at least 30. And in order to do that, you're going to need big plays. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, I even think back to the Michigan game last year, Brian. That game was on TV a little bit earlier. I was about to text you about it, but I mean, Cade McNamara was a very average quarterback last year, right? But in that game, although he didn't throw the ball much, he made a couple explosive plays, man. And he made a couple plays. He had a couple pass interference plays get called in that game. You have to create those explosive plays when you just know. Man, Ohio State, and again, I know it's a completely different defense and it's a completely different situation. I get it. But my point is that what team you're talking about, if a team is having trouble stopping the run, they're always going to allocate more to stopping the run, right? Like that's simple 101 stuff, right? Like I'm getting beat here. I need to do something different to stop it. And then if you are having trouble now stopping the other thing, because you have to allocate resources, then a defensive coordinator never wants to get in the in-between, Brian. It's like the in-between between being true to your scheme and then having to play out of your scheme, right? Like when you get into that little gray area there, then you start to scramble, man. And it is not fun. You're just like last second, like, linebacker blitz A gap. Like, I don't know what to do anymore, like you don't want to ever have that type of just quick impulsive decisions because you just don't have an answer. And big plays and running the football, those things together will make any defensive coordinator very nervous.
Yes.
Very nervous.